But joining us now to talk some hoops from Spotrac and the Front Office Show. Pleasure to welcome in friend of the show, Keith Smith. Keith, how are you this afternoon, my man?
I'm doing well. Thank you for having me.
Is LeBron retiring?
No, I don't think so. I know that's been the whole story, and he's getting accused of just trying to control the narrative and deflect from the Lakers losing, and maybe some of there's some truth in there. But my guess is, it was raw, emotion after, his season came to an end. And it's got to be the most difficult season of his career. And, they were left for dead in early February. Then they made, a series of trades and became a pretty good team, made the run to the West Finals. And I'm sure he was physically and emotionally hurting after that game. As, good friend Carmelo Anthony retired earlier that morning, and Dwayne Wade's been retired. He's probably looking around saying, like, man, I'm the last one left. My foot hurts, and I got to do, 5 months. I got to be ready to do this all over again. I'm sure there is some doubt in his mind, but my guess is we'll see him back on the court again next season.
Keith, was it just me, or was last night the first time in this series, and maybe the first time since the first play-in game, that Miami looked old?
Yeah, I think there's some truth to that. They looked a little slow, especially, Kyle Lowry didn't look very good in that game. Jimmy Butler looked like, he's maybe a little tired, which is, you've had a month of him really carrying the team now. You saw their limitations without Tyler Hero in the lineup of creating offense and the like. And, and the Celtics got after. I still think Miami's probably going to win this series. But if any team was ever going to do it, I think it could be, this type of situation where the Celtics still have a couple home games left. If it goes that far, your shooting variance can swing very widely for both of these teams. So, we'll see. I still think Miami gets it, but, if it's ever going to happen, this is the kind of situation it could happen in.
That's what Whitey said too, that just with this Celtics team and this Heat team, because I think most people looked at it on paper coming into this series, although people have been doing this to the Heat all playoffs, but the Celtics are the better team. And then it's just been a weird NBA season, Keith, when you look at the way that things have gone. This might be the year and the series where we see the streak of 150 series that went 3-0 going the way of the team that was up 3-0. This, and I'm with you. I think Miami probably takes it, but give the Celtics one more, and I start to question if I have to take that back.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's going to happen eventually, right? We never thought a 16 would be the one in the NCAA tournament. It happened. We never thought, teams would come from 0-3 in other sports, and it happened. And when you look at these two teams, Miami was not a great shooting team all season long. They were in previous years, and maybe they've gotten back to what they should be late in this season here. Boston was a very good shooting team, shot very poorly, despite the fact that they generated a ton of really good looks. So they can turn that around. And what I've been saying all day today is, if the Celtics win Game 5, the pressure is all on Miami. And if things start to go a little sideways, I wouldn't be surprised. Even though they're a veteran group, things start to get a little tight. Guys start to press a little bit. Things just get a little bit messy. And, and if it gets back to 7, Game 7 in Boston on Memorial Day, a day off, where that crowd's probably going to enjoy a little bit of day drinking and some fun, that could be an all-time environment if it gets there. So, if it's ever going to happen, this is the conditions are right, but don't think it will. But, we'll see. Tomorrow will tell us a lot.
Keith, as you know, if you go back to last season, before the Celtics took off in January, there was talk of, maybe Tatum and Brown, maybe they're not compatible. Then January, they took off, and they went to the finals and probably should have won that series against the Warriors. Well, if they get bounced early here, I mean, is that on the table again? Are the Celtics then again going to be wondering about Tatum and Brown and whether they're compatible on the floor together?
Yeah, I don't think so. I think the Celtics themselves feel very comfortable with those two guys playing together. But I think the questions that'll come in is Jaylen Brown is eligible for the so-called Supermax extension. If Boston offers him that and he doesn't sign it, which I think is unlikely, that'll cause a whole lot of issues. There's questions of, can the Celtics even give him the full Supermax, and feel good about their ability to build a functional roster around him and Tatum, making well in advance of $100 million a season a couple years from now, when the new penalties are coming in in the new CBA for the most expensive teams? That starts to become a question that needs to be asked too. So I think, there's some uncertainty related to Jaylen Brown staying with the Celtics long term, but I don't know that it's related to him and Tatum's partnership. I think everybody looks at it as, hey, these two guys are two All-NBA guys, two great wing players, which everybody else is looking for. Why would we split this up voluntarily?
Are these two teams playing for the right to lose to Nikola Jokic and the Nuggets?
It's certainly possible. I'm not going to count either Boston if they, pull off the 0-3 comeback and, or Miami if they, move on here in the next game or so. I think they'll have earned it. But, Denver's playing great. They're playing the best basketball of anybody right now. The team is, they're just deep enough. They have great functional depth, as I like to call it. They're not going to overwhelm you with 10, 11, 12 guys, but their top 7, 8 guys are pretty good, and they feel pretty good about them. Jokic is doing everything that you want him to do, and Jamal Murray looks like the guy that he was turning into during the bubble season. Looks like he's fully back to being that scoring weapon. And then on any given night, you can get a 30-point game from Michael Porter Jr., so the Nuggets are going to be really, really tough to beat.
I think we're seeing something really interesting in this postseason, Keith. Wondering what you think. You look at Denver, they basically run their offense through Jokic. The Celtics, I know Derek White's basically a point guard. They don't have a traditional point guard. The Lakers don't either. I know Kyle Lowry is kind of that for Miami. But are we seeing kind of the evolution of the position and a changing of the point guard, if you will? Teams are moving away from the traditional point guard and running their offenses more through bigger players?
Yeah, absolutely. And this is not a new thing to this year. This has been probably about a 3 or 4 year evolution to this point. Everybody likes to scream and yell, when things go sideways up. They've got to get a traditional point guard in there to run the show. They need to get a traditional point guard. And my counter always is, okay, who? Without a doubt, the response is someone like Chris Paul. Well, Chris Paul's one of one.
Yeah.
Right? He's the only one left. Point guards now they're like anybody else. They're scoring players. They've got to be shooters. They don't necessarily run the offense. The days of John Stockton brings it up, runs pick and roll 100 times a game, and sets guys up. Those days are gone. We don't. The league doesn't run that way anymore. The defenses are also too good. These guys who are 6'1", it's too easy to trap them if they're everything has to flow through them. Teams can blow those offenses up and make problems for those guys. So I think we're just in that cycle right now where that's not where we're at. We don't run the offense that way. We run it through whoever your best player is, kind of regardless of position, and then you just keep it moving that way.
Let me ask you a Kings related question, if I could, before we let you go. Talking with Keith Smith of Spotrac and the Front Office Show here on Cattles and Ramie. Let's say the Kings have some more growing pains to go through, and it's 2-3 years from now that they're actually ready to compete for a championship. Who in the West do you think gets in the way?
That's a good question. I think Denver has a chance to still be there 2-3 years from now because most of their guys are signed, or they've got the ability to sign. I think by that point, I have to imagine the Warriors will have aged out and moved on. I don't know that it'll be this iteration of the Clippers, but when you have the kind of money Steve Ballmer has, and he seems very, very willing to continue to spend, I think there's a chance that they're a pretty good team. And then who knows if Victor Wembanyama is everything we think he is, San Antonio Spurs could be there very, very quickly. The Houston Rockets, who have they've got a ton of cap space. If they don't, I think signing James Harden would be a mistake, but they could turn that situation around very, very quickly as well. So there's definitely going to be other teams, but I think the Kings, because of where they're at, kind of on their age curve, should be pretty good, because it looks like the other team I would have picked, Memphis Grizzlies, looks like they're doing kind of everything they can to make sure they're not going to be that team. They just keep, kind of stepping all over themselves.
Keith, folks can follow you at Keith Smith NBA for all the basketball stuff like we're talking about here. But today you shared something on Twitter. You quote tweeted this and said, I've watched this 5 times and cracked up each time, that I also just have to keep watching over and over again. Whitey, did you see this? It's a video of a van just driving into a wrecking ball over and over again.
No.
And higher and higher
No
speeds.
Basketball tonight. I have something to watch now.
It gets up to 300 miles per hour, and it hits the wrecking ball and just goes flying. It's got to fly like half a mile, 3/4 of a mile. Keith, it's amazing. I thank you for sharing it, and I see why you've watched it 5 times.
Yeah, I think it's very clearly AI driven because it's like an old medieval times mace that's just randomly hanging in the highway. So I think we learned 2 lessons, right? If you're going to speed, you better keep your eye open for maces just randomly dropping down like it's a game of Mario Kart or something. I don't know, but it tickled my fancy today. I couldn't stop watching and laughing every single time.
It was very cool. Very, very cool. That's Keith Smith. Check out his work at Spotrac and on the Front Office Show and at Keith Smith NBA on Twitter for basketball and fun stuff like that. We appreciate the time, Keith.
I appreciate it. Thank you for having me.
And he joins me on the Folsom Lake Honda Hotline. Folsom Lake Honda, your one stop